Can you please slow down, ma'am? Wait, how much algae?
We've got questions on line 2, 3, 6, and 8.
What do I cut? There's no red, green, or white.
Don't cut any of the wires. You'll kill you and your fish.
Sure.
There has to be a more efficient way to answer all of these questions.
Dramatic, we can just do a live YouTube Q&A.
Genius.
Guys, seriously, with this drama? Come on.
So welcome to our second Big Al's live Q&A. We're glad to have you here again. So it's Chris Whitelaw and myself, Thomas. We're going to be answering your aquatics questions today. You can ask those questions right in the live chat here, or you can also reach us on Facebook or Twitter, #AskAl. And if you haven't checked it out already, look at our YouTube channel. We've got tons of great videos. We've got some different how-to videos. We've got some information, product review, stuff like that. So check it out there. In fact, we got a quick preview for you. So have a look.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, we're rolling. Hey, it's Thomas here, an aquatics expert with Big Al's, and today I'm going to talk to you about the mover pumps, quarantine tanks, how you can introduce fish to your new freshwater aquarium, a hang-on filter by Marineland, bearded dragon enclosure, how to make a natural-looking aquarium using plastic plants, the Aquatic Life Halo Eheim 2217 canister filter.
My name's Chelsea, and these are your Big Al's fun facts.
Cool. I like to take a moment to add a little bit of slime coat additive to the aquarium. Look at him go! He's so happy, I can tell. He's smiling. Can you picture your aquarium there? All right, we found our spot.
How do different types of fish get their name?
Well, Jackson, fish have two different types of names.
Well, we've already got our first question, so let's hear it.
All right, our first question is, hi Thomas and Chris, saltwater question here. Just a few days ago, I started to cycle my saltwater tank. Since starting, I have learned much about using reverse osmosis water as opposed to tap water, especially for coral tanks, which I intend to keep. Unfortunately, I learned of RO water after filling my tank with tap water. My question is, do you think it'd be best to scrap my current water and start recycling with RO water? Additionally, is there an aquarium sea salt I should be considering for corals or a reef tank, or is most aquarium sea salt going to be suitable? Thanks so much, Ashton.
Well, solid question. Really, there's two ways to approach what you, which is you started with tap water for your reef tank, when ideally you'd want to start with RO water or RODI water, which is even better. You don't have to scrap it all and start over. As long as you've used like a good water conditioner like Seachem Prime or something, a lot of those heavy metals are going to be neutralized to a degree. If there are any amounts of trace amounts of like copper that have managed to get through, or phosphates, you can use something like is it Coopermine? No.
Cuprosorb.
Cuprosorb. Thank you.
Yep.
Cuprosorb by Seachem will pull
a lot of the metals.
A lot of the metals out. Any copper. I've had issues with heavy metals in the past, and it's worked brilliantly. You can use a ferric oxide to remove any potential phosphates that are in the water. Those are two very common things you can do, and that'll prevent you from having to go through everything again. I don't know how far through the cycle you are, but if you know, even if you're a week in, I would probably do that rather than start all over. But the other option is, yeah, you can definitely make a new batch of water and start brand new.
I would say a lot depends on tank size.
Yeah.
If you're just starting and it's a small tank,
it's not
you're probably better off just to scrap it. If you're dealing with a 60 or 100 gallon tank, do the phosphate pads and do the chemical absorbing medium.
Yeah, it'll be more cost effective the larger you go, obviously, for sure.
The second question was about salt, and I would say you get what you pay for in general.
Very much, very much. And if you start with a salt that isn't reef specific, you're going to be lacking certain minerals. You're also going to lack, you know, calcium, magnesium, strontium, molybdenum, all of those elements in certain concentrations. Whereas if you get a coral specific salt, all of those things are already laid out for you, and you don't have to add them right at the beginning, but you will have to, over time, replenish them. So although it's not super important to start with a reef specific salt, it'll save you money on additives, because every time you mix new water, you're going to have to add those things to get the water up to par before you can use it for your reef tank. Salts that I really like, Reef Crystals does a good job. Red Sea's reef salt is fantastic. Tropic Marin's fantastic. You can't go wrong with any of those. They're all great. Yeah. But it's really going to come down to your budget, like what you want to spend in terms of salt. Some are a little bit more expensive than others, and that usually doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a better salt for the tank, but it usually tells you how fast that salt is going to dissolve and how easily it's going to dissolve. So some salts, you'll notice that at the bottom of the bucket when you're done, no matter how much you let it mix, there's granules. And those are just insoluble compounds that have gunked up together. Usually it's pieces of calcium carbonate and stuff that just couldn't get into the water. Whereas really high-grade reef salts, you usually never have that.
Yeah. One thing for novice saltwater people, always add salt to the water. Never put the salt in the bottom of the bucket and then throw your water in.
Correct.
Yeah, there's the reason for that, I think, has got to do with a lot of the buffers get messed up when there's a very small amount of water and a lot of salt together.
Absolutely. Always, always, always add salt to water and not the other way around.
Okay, guys, another question from Garrett. He asks, hi, my friend says he has aquarium gravel as filter material in his canister filters and it works. Could this be true?
Could be.
Yes and no.
Lots of things work. Some things work better than others.
A lot better. So aquarium, you can technically use aquarium gravel as a biological medium.
Sure.
People use under gravel filters for a very, very long time, and the gravel did act as your biological media.
Yep.
But the medias that they have out there today, which by volume in some cases are much cheaper than buying gravel, do a much better job. They're really, really porous, and that gives a vast surface area for those bacteria to grow on. So you actually culture a lot more bacteria for the space that you're using. And canisters only have so much space in them. So filling it with gravel's not the best idea. It may work, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I guess a lot just depends upon how much extra you're willing to do. If your filtration is a little bit less than adequate, you're going to need to do more in the way of water changes to keep your tank stable.
Yeah.
You know, I totally agree with you there. Yeah, it's all about surface area.
Yeah, surface area is important.
And most of the biological media now is ceramic.
Yep.
And extremely, extremely porous, even if it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
It's all about the area.
All right, guys, our next question from Lois D1 says, I'm having nightmares. I have a 30-gallon freshwater. I have these tiny sand-sized snails. How can I get rid of them?
Loaches.
Yeah, natural or artificial. Natural is better.
Natural is always better. The less chemicals you dump in your tank for getting rid of problems like algae or snails, the better. So loaches, including the dwarf botia loaches, work really well.
Which we like for smaller tanks and less aggressive fish. So it's called the Siamese dwarf botia. I think it's Botia sidthunki. or Sid monkey, something like that.
Some sort of Latin.
I'm totally mispronouncing the name. I'm sorry to any ichthyologists out there. But yeah, common name, dwarf botia. Pretty much any member of the botia family will work. Small puffers do, but generally puffers aren't appropriate to most people's tanks.
They can be a little aggressive, super nippy.
Yeah.
Assassin snails work extremely well.
I don't know if they're going to work on the little tiny guys so well.
Maybe not.
Yeah, they get into the big snails and kind of bore into those. I'm not sure about the small snails.
Usually small snails, do they not? Like the adult size of those micro snails is like still pretty tiny.
Yeah, quarter of an inch.
Yeah, loaches.
Yeah, loaches. Your chemical means are basically copper-based, so you're not dealing with a planted aquarium, and unfortunately most people with snail problems are, because they come in, snail eggs are transparent and very small. They are easily to come in with plants, because plants are generally grown in outdoor ponds and vats that contain lots of things. Copper-based, if your fish can tolerate it and you don't have live plants, then things like how to snail or the copper-based meds will work very effectively.
Yep.
But do your homework first and make sure that that whatever you have isn't sensitive to copper.
Yeah, like we said, we always recommend natural. I've had great success with those dwarf botias. I'd recommend them to anyone.
And kill as many as you can find first.
Oh yeah, always.
And you can even attract a bunch by throwing down some algae wafers or zucchini or lettuce or something for them to kind of congregate on. Any kind of food that attracts them after about 20 minutes, just get rid of them.
Hi guys, next question from Melinda says, I was thinking about setting my 55-gallon sand. Are there advantages or disadvantages to this over gravel, sand over gravel?
Mostly disadvantages, to be honest. Sand is hard to maintain because if you siphon, like use a gravel siphon or gravel cleaner, you generally pull a lot of the sand out because it's very light. Some people really like just the look of it, and that's, in my opinion, the only benefit to using sand, unless you have a species that is intolerant to gravel or larger substrates. So, you know, rays sometimes, most of the time do a lot better on sand. But unless that's a specific requirement for the species you're keeping, sand's usually just a pain, and I generally avoid it.
I have rarely seen a tank that's been done with sand that looks really good a year or two down the line. Typically, you get a lot of algae. It gets discolored. The actual grains wind up with algae and stuff just sort of permanently on them. Thomas is absolutely right about siphoning being a bit of a chore. You have to keep the gravel cleaning hose very kinked and low. Rays, yes. Plants will generally do better with a finer medium.
Yeah.
They don't like a lot of oxygen around the root systems. But there's lots of gravels that are in a very small particle size that are very suitable for planted tanks or for stingrays. They're not big enough to irritate them. So that would be my preference, is a very, very fine gravel. You get the look, but less hassle.
Agreed, fully. And just for all our viewers out there, I think it's mention this to you. We're going to be letting you know about some exclusive deals and how to get them. For everybody watching today. So I'll give you a little bit more detail on that later, but they're actually pretty awesome, so stick around.
All right, guys, and just as a follow-up to Lois D, who talked about the tiny sand-sized snails, he says, I have an assassin snail, and he's gone to sleep.
Loaches.
Like permanently? Yeah, if he didn't get enough food, assassin snails will expire because they don't really eat a whole lot else. The longest I've had an assassin snail personally was about a year, and then I ran out of snails, and then he kind of disappeared.
Yeah, if you only had one assassin snail and a whole ton of other snails, it's not going to do squat.
No.
Same thing with the loaches. That's why I say kill as many as you can first, and then whatever means of control you put in is able to keep up with the rest. But I suspect, I don't know for sure, but from what I've heard of the assassins, is I think they are more predators to larger snails and may not be physically modified to be able to bore into or handle the little guys.
Okay, yeah, we're going to take a quick little break, and you know what? We're going to have you check out one of our cooler tanks that we've set up. basically, we had this bright idea about our Jurassic aquarium when the movie came out, featuring some really cool dinosaurs. We were inspired, so we basically did something up custom. So have a look. Yeah. So if you guys want to see how we made that Jurassic terrarium, which is actually pretty cool, it's just tons and tons of foam, and we actually have a really cool video that time lapses everything and how we put it together. So check that out after if you're interested.
All right, guys, we have another question. This one again from Vi Garrett. He asks, hey, Thomas and Chris, I have 28-inch Nile beach eater. He eats a lot of silverside. I was told you can feed smelt to fish, and it is cheaper than silverside. What do you think?
Be careful. I think anything is decent in moderation. Smelt is kind of an oily fish, so it will tend to pollute your water quite a lot. And I would not, regardless of what type of fish you give, don't just feed one type exclusively.
Yeah.
Smelt, as far as I know, it's basically a large minnow that is found in North America, freshwater.
Yeah, if it is the freshwater smelt. There are different species that are referred to as smelt, so you don't know what you're getting a lot of the time, but
a lot of them are gutted. Much of the nutrition that a predator is in the internal organs. That's why if you ever see any videos of lions killing things or wolves, they're after the insides first. That's where all your vitamins, where all the good stuff is. By the way, I'm a vegetarian, so like don't take anything into that. But nutritionally, a lot of the smelt and a lot of those bigger fish are gutted. They're soul gutted, and that's not very good for the animals. So once in a while, probably harmless. As a mainline thing, I would say not. Even the silversides is a mainline thing, generally not.
No.
And again, in general, try to feed saltwater fish to saltwater predators, freshwater fish to freshwater predators. Other things you could feed them would be frozen foods like krill.
Yep, krill work really well.
Yeah, earthworms occasionally.
Earthworms are great if they'll take pelleted food, supplementing with just a
shrimp pellet
or any predatorial food. I know Hikari has a couple different, like Massive or Delight and stuff. If they'll take that, it's a good way to make sure they're getting those vitamins and minerals they might not be getting in prepared fish foods.
Yep.
Like you mentioned that the smelt a lot of the time are gutted. Even some silversides products are prepared. So it's important they get a very round diet and not a specifically one type of food all the time. Fish will get various issues from a lack of nutrition, and you might not see it until later into their adult life, where you get malformed gill plates, malformed fins, malformed just body structure. That's how you know a lot of the time that something dietary has gone wrong, either early in their life or long term is just not working out for them. It usually leads to shorter lifespans, or just a lack of ability to produce viable offspring if you're planning to breed. But
even just a compromised immune system,
yeah,
much like in people. The most common, because we kind of broached the subject of oily fish and oily foods, the most common problem with that is a fatty liver, and that can kill fish. I know, unfortunately, I think some sharks sort of succumbed to that in public aquariums a long time ago when they were just feeding a lot of mackerel and stuff like that, exclusively because it was abundant and it was inexpensive.
Hey guys, we have questions coming up from Matt Woods, and we have a follow-up from Elois D1. But first I want to get to Judy Day. This sounds like a bit of an emergency, so I figured we'd get that one to the front of the line here.
All right.
Judy says, thank you for having this session. I have a serious problem with my angelfish. She suddenly developed a swollen belly. Now she floats facing upwards. She can swim correctly when chasing the male or wants to eat. She had stopped eating for about 4 days. She's breathing quickly and moving her tail rapidly. This is going on for about a week.
I think it's probably, well, she may have gulped air feeding. I mean, she's upside down, so that means there's a problem with her buoyancy in her swim bladder. She may have an inflammation of her swim bladder. Common cause for this kind of stuff is simply constipation. So if you see white stringy feces hanging off the fish, that is constipation, often a result of too much dry food. Easy thing to try for constipation, or regardless, is magnesium sulfate or Epsom salts. And you can use that quite safely at the rate of about a tablespoon for every of aquarium water that you have. That acts as kind of a laxative on the fish. If you see any signs of lifting scales away from the body, any redness in the fins, then those are indications that there may be a bacterial infection present. And I would go with Canicin. Chem Caniplex is the product.
Yep.
That is about the most effective antibiotic at getting inside of freshwater fish, because freshwater fish don't take in a lot of the surrounding water. If she's still eating, you can not only treat the water with it, ideally in a hospital or quarantine tank. And Thomas, I think you did a segment on those.
Yep, we have a video on our channel that you can check out.
You can also take a small amount of the powder in a little bit of water, like a cup of water, dissolve it thoroughly, and then add some dry food. It'll soak it up very quickly, and you can pour that into your tank, and it's a very safe and easy way to actually medicate your food and feed it to the fish. And it's going to go inside where it can do the most good.
Exactly, yeah.
I've actually punctured swim bladders to relieve the stress of too much air, but I wouldn't want to try and go over that in this video and with something as small as an angelfish. I think the odds of you doing more harm than good are quite high. I've done it to larger fish like arowanas and frontosis before.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So we'll move on to a follow-up from Elois D1 on his assassin snail. You want to know, but won't the assassin snail reproduce and cause another problem?
Very unlikely, because they won't have the food source to sustain themselves. And I'm not sure what water chemistry they require to effectively propagate. Many snail species need brackish water or salt water. They do fine in fresh water, but the babies will never hatch. I know nereid snails are in that alley. Honestly, I don't know enough about assassin snails to...
Yeah, I don't either. The only thing I can say is that in the stores that I'm responsible for, we've been selling them for years, and I work in the stores regularly. I've yet to hear of a customer saying, hey, I got an abundance of assassin snails, I want to trade in, or I'm breeding these things. Where I certainly do see that with other more common snails like the mystery or Inca snails, apple snails, and stuff like that. So that needs a bit more research, but there is probably a lot of truth to what Thomas says, that they don't either reproduce that quickly. A lot of predator animals don't. They're at the top of the food chain and everything has to be proportionate, or they need very specific conditions to get them to go.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody having an issue with
It wouldn't be a big concern of mine.
Okay, as our next question is from Matt. He asks, I have a filter in my Betta aquarium, and he hides when it's running. Any idea why?
Could be too much flow.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Bettas don't necessarily want a lot of flow, and they're also, even in tanks that have adequate flow, bettas very, very often rest on leaves, on ornaments, on heaters, on anything. They like to turn everything in your tank into a hammock. They're usually only really active when they are getting ready to breed, other bettas around, or if they're hungry. I have a Betta, it's actually my wife's Betta, and there's a lot of Anubias in that tank, and he spends 99.9% of his time on those Anubias. And it's a decent sized tank. It's a 12-gallon tank, it's got a filter, not a ton of flow, but enough to move everything around. The guppies in the tank swim all over the place. He spends his entire day sitting on stuff until he sees one of us because he knows he's going to get fed, and then he's active while he's feeding and immediately goes back down to doing nothing.
Yeah. A lot of filters have a little control mechanism on the top, like a plus or minus. Try turning it down and see what happens. A lot of them will have nozzles that are directional. Just try changing the flow pattern and see what happens. I wouldn't recommend that you intermittently turn the filter on and off if that's what you're doing. The filter should always be on.
Absolutely.
And then you can consider maybe if the tank is quite bare and you want to leave the filter running, which is a good idea, maybe get some Anubias or one of the little Betta. They sell little Betta leaves, plastic hammocks. Give him something that he's going to be able to be more comfortable with and hopefully be out more in the open where you can see him hanging out.
Yeah, those Betta leaves, I believe they're by ZoomEd. If you put them near the top of the tank, the Betta will use it right near the surface of the water. They like being close to the surface, so I'm not sure how, like the dimensions of your tank. Maybe he's already fairly close to the surface, but they like being up there because they are a labyrinth fish and they will use the surface oxygen periodically.
If you don't know, Bettas evolved in swamps and rice paddies, basically in Southeast Asia. So these are not areas of water with a great deal of current or water movement. That being said, a filter is always a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, before we get to more questions, viewers of our Q&A actually will get access to exclusive deals. You had mentioned it, Thomas. Can you let everyone know how they can go about that?
So you can get exclusive deals if you send an email to us at customerservice@bigowlsonline.com. So one more time, it's customerservice@bigowlsonline.com. Just send us an email, give us your name and your location and whether or not you shop in-store or online.
Perfect, guys. And share it with your friends. Post this Q&A on your social media and share it with your friends and let them know that if they tune in and watch, all they have to do is email us and they can get access to these exclusive deals, okay? So our next question is from, let's go back to Matt Woods. Now he has a question about mantis shrimp. I was considering getting a mantis shrimp, but I heard they can break aquarium glass. Is that true? And how can you safely house one?
Is this the same Matt Woods with the Betta?
Maybe.
Well, it's not going with the Betta.
Technically, yes. They can break glass. Thin glass, it's been shown on forums, people have talked about it. They definitely have enough force to crack thin glass. If we're talking a larger aquarium or an aquarium with, I would say, even 3/8 inch glass or more, they're not getting through. I would avoid any small plastic tanks like critter keepers or anything like that. They could probably crack, but they don't usually just go around smacking the glass. Usually they're hiding and hanging out, and then they'll use their appendages when they're feeding. The other thing is there's two different types of mantis shrimp. There are smashers and spears. Spears can't break anything. They'll break themselves before they break glass. Smashers, there are not a ton of species that you're going to be able to get in the aquatics industry, like aquarium keeping, that are capable of breaking glass. The largest one that I think you can get is a peacock mantis, and I'm sure they might be able to crack through as an adult, which is a very big mantis shrimp. They might be able to get through maybe a 5-gallon or 10-gallon tank, but if you have them in anything bigger, I would be blown away if they managed to get through it.
Okay, guys, our next question from YouTube is Faith of a Child Ministry, and she asks, is there something that can keep my canister tubing from scaling up with that white, almost nothing flaky stuff? We clean them, and in about a month, it's right back. We have well water. My water test's fine, and my goldfish are thriving, but the tubes, they're gross. When I do a filter clean, I have to shoot the first bit of water into a bucket to catch the wisps of snowy scale until the bubbles stop it from flaking off the tubing. Yuck.
Sounds like hard water.
Mm-hmm.
Well water is extremely hard for the most part, and you get a lot of mineral content. So unless you do something with that water, like a method of filtration like reverse osmosis, for at least half the water going in, that's just something you're going to have to continue to deal with, unfortunately.
And if your goldfish are thriving, I mean, they might not mind if you soften their water, but really, it's going to be a lot of effort and possible expense just to get your filter tubing cleaner looking all the time. There are filter cleaning attachments that look like big pipe cleaners.
Yep.
And they typically will have a little circle on the end of it. So you can attach them to airline tubing or thin yarn, rope, whatever that's going to be strong enough to pull them through, and essentially you just pull them through your tubing and they clean it out very effectively. So you can do that periodically or when you do clean your filter. But,
right.
I'm with you. It's just one of those things that you're probably better off just to live with.
It's not uncommon.
No. And if your filter tubing is clear, you may consider switching to a darker filter tubing.
Yep.
It's a cosmetic thing, but you won't notice it as much.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay guys, next question is from Jennifer. She asks, my aquarium water is cloudy and I can't seem to get it to clear up. Any ideas why?
That is a very open-ended question.
Very common question.
Yep. What color cloudiness? Because it makes all the difference.
Okay, well, let's go through both scenarios.
Okay.
You want cloudy or you want green?
So there's cloudy, green, or discolored. Discolored is usually in the yellow-brown spectrum of things. Green is just green. And then if we're talking smoky, milky, or gray-looking water, that's its own thing. So we'll start with the gray smoky water. Usually that is a bacterial imbalance. Basically, your biological filtration isn't keeping up with the aquarium, or you've upset it somehow. This is very commonly done if people do a big water change, can give you a little bit of cloudiness. Or if you do a water change and clean out your filter at the same time, that can give you cloudiness because you're disrupting the bacteria in the canister filter. Or if you, or hang-on filter, whatever filter it is, or if you do a very thorough cleaning of your filter and then put it back on your tank, that can also cause cloudiness. Usually you just have to wait this out. I also highly recommend adding a bacterial additive to the water. That will help fix or speed up that cloudiness and make it go away. Make sure you feed minimally during that time because you are at risk for an ammonia spike while you have that imbalance.
If I may add to that, overfeeding will typically cause that. Dead fish in a small tank, you know, something that's decomposing. Just to add to filter cleaning, anything that's reusable, very common mistake that people make. So pre-filter media and canister filters, foam blocks, that kind of stuff. A lot of people think the cleaner the better. That's not necessarily true. And a common mistake is to take old media and clean it under the tap. The tap water in most municipalities is going to contain chlorine, which is there to kill bacteria for human consumption purposes. Nukes your good nitrifying bacteria, and so you get this bacterial bloom. So anything that's reusable, always clean it in water that's from the aquarium. That's the safest thing to do, and it doesn't have to be spotless. Just squeeze out the sponge, get most of the gunk off. A little bit of dirt is not a bad thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So shall you take the green water?
Green water, algae, suspended algae. Strong light, you know, near a window, sunlight, leaving your lights on too long, basically excess nutrients. So, you know, look at the cause. Not enough water changes, too much phosphate, lots of things. Normally just start with, if it's possible, to cut down on your lighting and do some water changes, maybe some phosphate pads in there, and may not clear up overnight, but generally we'll do so in time. They also sell flocculators.
Yep.
So Kenpro Clear, a bunch of other products will take either the bacteria or the algae, which are really tiny little microscopic organisms and make them stick to each other and form larger particles, which instead of passing through your filter will actually form large enough particles to get trapped by your filter. That's cosmetic, but you have to address the reason behind if you want a long-term fix.
Absolutely. And the last one, which is discoloration, is usually a result of driftwood or tannins in the water. Live plants decomposing can sometimes cause this as well. The easiest way to get any kind of just discoloration out of the water that isn't that cloudiness we were talking about earlier or algae is to use some carbon. It works extremely well. It works very quickly. Just plain old aquarium carbon. You don't need to get any fancy pelletized stuff, and it'll just pull it out. Tannins aren't necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people will add tannins purposefully to aquariums that house fish that come from regions where those tinted water, like
Amazon basin, West Africa.
It provides different mineral content, and it usually softens the water a little bit, makes it a little bit acidic. So it's good for those fish. If you don't like it and you just happen to put a piece of driftwood in and it's not driving, go ahead and use some carbon. It'll pull it right out. We're just going to take a quick break, and we've actually got some pretty cool footage for you. Take a look at this. This is footage from deep sea, actually, when they did a bit of an exploration, and they found some really cool creatures. Nice. Welcome back, guys. I just want to remind you, we have some really cool exclusive deals for you. So make sure you get your friends to come and join us, check it out so they can get on those deals as well. And to get access to them, don't forget, send us an email at customerservice@bigowlsonline.com and give us your name, your location, where you're from, and whether or not you're shopping in-store or online, and we'll hook you up.
All right, guys. So we have a follow-up question from Elois B1. It says, last question regarding those sand-sized snails. I use a fluval system. Will they wreck it?
Potentially. They will wreck any filter they go through. Any pump that they physically travel through, they have the potential to damage the impeller.
Yep.
Or even the impeller well.
Stop it. Yeah, they can get up right in there and scratch the impeller. So yeah, get rid of them if you can, and make sure that when you do, you clean out your filter very thoroughly. If you're going to try and just sort of leave them and deal with the natural way, then be on the filter, because that will be a breeding ground even if you reduce the number in your tank.
Absolutely.
And possibly consider putting some sort of a relative barrier at the very topmost portion of your filter. You know, a very fine pad that's fairly compact that's going to make it difficult for them to travel up and into the filter well, if that's at all possible.
Yeah, absolutely. They're a pain. They're not fun.
All right, next question is from Michael Wan. He asks, how do you know when I have the LED lights running too high before the SPS bleach out, or when the lights are not bright enough?
Here's my recommendation. It's really hard to tell unless you get a par or at bare minimum lux reading of the lights you've previously had over the SPS. So even at store level, if you bring one of those meters with you, you can check what the store's lighting is like for those specific SPS, and you can mimic that at home. Without doing that, you don't know. And the only way to safely introduce them is to turn your lights down and slowly bring them back up over the course of usually a couple weeks. SPS are fairly tolerant, but once they start bleaching, it is hard to stop, and it takes even longer to recover. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's definitely possible. I've had SPS that were pretty well bone white. When I say bone white, I mean you couldn't even tell they had a layer of flesh on them anymore. And the only spot they had any inkling of zoantholae was underneath the branches. There was a slight line of brown where I could tell there was still something there. And it took about 3 months for a turnaround for that entire SPS to be a dark brown color again. And that was primarily in a shaded area because really you got to start low once they bleach. So the safe thing to do, always start with lower lighting and bring it up. Low lighting will not generally kill SPS. It will just force them to shed their bright colors, and they'll go brown, and that brown is basically the zoantholae that you can now see using the light. So be safe, start low, go high.
Next question from Vi Garrett. We have questions coming up, by the way, from Todd Rassett and Maureen Foley. We have those coming up, but this one from Vi Garrett. Do you think it was right to ban snakehead in the US? I love these fish.
That is such... It's hard to say.
I don't think so. I'll speak up on that one.
Okay.
To me, and they also banned them in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a Canada-wide thing. I know within the states there are some fish that are legal in some states and not in others. I think piranhas are one of them that are varied depending upon states. To me, it was a knee-jerk reaction, and I don't like that of anything. There was over 20 some odd snakeheads. As far as I know, the reason for the ban was that they were found in 2 incidences in the Great Lakes. Never any sort of proof that there was a breeding population going. These were just very likely releases by, frankly, idiot hobbyists who should not be putting anything into the wild. And we're all paying the price for it. And
yeah,
there are species of snakeheads that really couldn't possibly survive in the northern end of the US.
Yeah, there are lots of species of snakehead. Some of them are actually pretty small, extremely decorative, would never survive in our climate.
Very, very tropical.
Yeah, and the fact that they just banned everything really upset me at the time. When I started with this company, the very first fish that I purchased was a snakehead, followed by a bowfin. And both of those I can't get anymore, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, no, it was a knee-jerk reaction, and unfortunately we start to see a lot more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what? The end result is it's caused by us, by aquarium hobbyists. Mm-hmm. If we hadn't put snakeheads out into those lakes to begin with, it wouldn't have happened.
We have to, as a community, always remember that these things are within our control, and we have to be responsible pet owners. We're like no other, every other pet owner is the same as us. Doesn't matter if you're keeping birds, cats, dogs, whatever. None of these things should ever be let go, released into the wild, or just treated, with zero respect, essentially. It's within our power. So just make sure that, you do the right thing. You don't flush fish carcasses. You don't release fish into the wild. You don't release plants into the wild. You don't dump your aquarium water down sewer drains. Just be safe about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're in the position where you have a pet that has outgrown your ability to care for it, I mean, honestly, we should try to plan for how big something gets, whether it's a pacu or a snakehead or any kind of big predator like that. You know, but certain life changes, circumstances happen. There are certainly options available to you, rather than just like, okay, I'm going to dump it in the lake, which some people will think to do, unfortunately. You know, a lot of pet stores will take fish in for credit.
Yep.
There are fish rescue organizations often affiliated with aquarium clubs, Craigslist, Kijiji. A lot of people take stuff in for free.
Yep.
Yeah, turtles too.
Yeah, turtles are a big one.
Yeah.
Speaking of turtles, guys, we have questions coming from Todd Rassett, but speaking of turtles, Maureen says, I'm adopting 2 young aquatic turtles and have bought almost everything to set up the tank. Cool. Do you have any good videos or tutorials on the best way to set it all up? New to this.
We don't yet, but we are planning to actually do a turtle how-to. Depending on the species, will very dramatically change how you set something up. Some turtles are primarily aquatic and don't really want much in the way of land. And then you've got other ones that are going to want a lot more land than water. If it's a common species like a red-eared slider or a yellow-bellied cooter or any of those guys, it's actually pretty straightforward. If you email us or give us a call, we can definitely help you out with that. The phone number to call and speak to one of our reps is 1-888-824-4257. We can definitely give you a hand there. Hit us up at customerservice@bigowlsonline.com. They'll actually, if you ask to, they can forward that email directly to me and we can have a conversation directly about it. I'd love to help you out.
Yeah. One thing I might add on that is keep it clean. Yeah. You know, turtles aren't fish. They're not breathing through their gills, so you're not necessarily thinking of polluted water affecting the fish. But salmonella, acidity of the water impacting their shell growth, absolutely. So you still have to be on top of, and generally turtle tanks are going to have very small amounts of water. So there's a lot of waste going into a very small amount of water. So that means cleanliness is super important.
Yeah, we always recommend canister filters, and because they actually turtle tanks don't have a lot of water in them, they can be difficult to prime. But the one I'm actually holding here, just by chance, I have beside me.
Just by chance.
I know. We've got 2. We've also got an Eheim beside us. But this is the Cobalt EXT canister filter. The motor head actually doesn't have a motor in the top. The motor's separate. It's an inline pump. And there's a way to set it up so that the pump is inside the tank underwater and primes the canister for you. We actually have a video on our channel on how to set this bad boy up. So take a look at that. This is the turtle filter in my opinion. It is amazing. It's simple to work with, and a canister is what we generally recommend anyways. So have a look at that.
So the next question, all the way from Minneapolis, Todd Rassett asks, any tips to live planting? I'm a bad reader, but I'm practicing. Any tips to live planting a 6-gallon fluval edge? Is soil a bad idea, and am I going to have issues with the glass surface collecting plant debris?
I don't like soil.
I also don't like the fluval edge too much. They're very, in my opinion, I've worked with them, and I have actually planted one before. It's difficult because you don't have a very large opening. If you're going to do a fluval edge, I would highly recommend sticking to small species that are not finicky. I would, basically, Anubias and rock works way better in a fluval edge than anything else.
Yes.
Soil is terrible. Fluval stratum's okay to start with, but it's just pelletized dirt essentially, and it will end up becoming sludge, and it's extremely, extremely hard to rinse out. It's very, you're going to get a black, milky substance coming out of it when you rinse it. I love this stuff for larger tanks, for people who are experienced with planting and experienced with dealing with really muddy soils. But beyond that, I would just say a really nice looking gravel. You can even use, if you want to use a plant substrate, Sechem fluorite works really well because it's heavy. And then, yeah, I would do mostly like Anubias and just keep it easy. Everything else to really look nice, a lot of the common plants, Rotella, all that, is going to grow way too fast if you keep it properly, and it won't look good in such a tiny...
It'll be very difficult to sort of maintain that and trim things. Anubias nana has the smaller leaves than the Barterii types, and there's a form called Petite, which is even smaller. Those are great for small tanks. Some of the smaller cryptocarans, I think Parva is one of the smallest breed ones. Yeah, Hydro Compact, that's another one that's fairly small and dense. That's an easy plant to grow. Just simply planting stuff is going to be a pain. I think you're going to need to maybe find some very long sort of laboratory like tweezers.
Which we actually carry, I think.
Probably for corals.
Tropica, I believe we have a series of planting tools from them, including scissors, which you're going to need in such a tiny tank, believe me. Curved tip and everything, which will make it a little bit easier to get in and around that collar that you're kind of confined to. I know it's an in-store only product, so if you shop in-store, CChem has a fantastic line of plant tools as well through Aqua Vitro, which is their store premium line. So you can also look there. But yeah, just get the tools that are going to essentially make it easier for you. Because I'll tell you, it's discouraging to try to work in a small space like that without tools. You'll get frustrated. So spend the 20 or 30 bucks on those planting tools, and you'll really appreciate it in the long run.
And keep it simple.
And don't forget, we've got exclusive deals. So if you want to buy some stuff, don't forget to email us at customerservice@bigalsonline.com. Let us know that you're watching right now and you want those exclusive deals. Give us your name, where you're from, so your location, and whether or not you're going to be shopping in line or on store, and we'll hook you up. So,
well, guys, and just so everyone knows, I'm posting links to some of these products that they're mentioning in our comments section. So if you want to check those out online, do that. We have a follow-up from Maureen about her aquatic turtles. She says she has red-eared sliders. She says, I just bought a canister filter rated for 100 gallons, and it's a 55-gallon tank. Would it be the same? And I think she's referring to the Cobalt here, saying, would it be the same as the Cascade 1000?
You'll probably have a difficult time priming that canister filter. You can't really use the priming button unless the tank's pretty well full of water. So if you haven't opened it up already and set everything up, I would highly recommend swapping it out for the XT. Otherwise, it's just a matter of making sure you prime it correctly. It can be a little bit difficult. You usually have to manually prime, which means you're going to have to suck on one of the tubes to actually get the water siphoning.
Turtle tank? Sucking a mouthful of water from a turtle tank?
Setting it up. Once you have it set up.
Salmonella.
Don't drink the water.
Don't drink the water.
Basically, when you're setting it up new, once you have water in those lines, every time you disconnect that valve, it'll keep the water in the lines. So you just take the canister away, do your maintenance, put it back, put the valve closed again, and it should refill itself.
Suggestion?
Yeah.
If you're going to keep the filter, consider investing in a smallish power head that has an exhaust that will adapt to the tubing that you have on your filter.
You can refill it that way?
Yeah, that would be a very easy way to shoot water into your intake lines and prime it just by plugging it in.
Just remember though, if you add any other moving parts, that needs to get cleaned up as well when you do maintenance.
That's just for the purpose of starting.
Yeah, that basically is going to be another thing to clean, but it will definitely get the job done if you don't feel like exchanging them. I'm really partial to these EXTs now because before they had these inline pumps, this was a common problem across the board. So they've solved it. Cobalt's done a great job with it. Cascade's a fine product. The only thing you will have an issue with is ever getting parts if the impeller breaks, if the seal ring goes bad, because they don't really make them available. We can't even really get them. We've tried.
Perfect. Okay, so we have another question from Matt. He asks, can a beginner or intermediate hobbyist handle a planted aquarium, or are they recommended more for experts? Using CO2 seems a little intimidating.
I wouldn't say it's for experts.
No. It all depends upon the plants.
Yeah, and it also depends on your interest level. I mean, the easiest way for me to put it is, and I've explained this to plenty of people, if this is, I just want a pretty planted tank in my house to look at, but I don't really want to have to do anything, you don't want a planted tank. Not unless you're going to hire somebody to take care of it. But if this is a genuine interest, like somebody who just likes to keep houseplants because they enjoy taking care of them, or, you know, I would make it akin to people who restore cars. They have a genuine interest in it, and they are going to do it, and then they'll drive those cars after. Nobody's going to buy a broken down beater and then be like, okay, it'll fix itself. So plant tanks are kind of the same. if you're interested in it, it's not hard. You just have to learn it, and then that's that. I mean, there's certain things you're gonna have to look at: maintaining proper fertilizer in the water, making sure your levels are correct, and then CO2. But it's not insanely difficult, and they've made it quite easy these days with CO2 indicators instead of having to use like pH controllers and all that. And even if you really want a full lush plant tank, you don't need CO2. You could do a low-tech tank, and there's products like Seachem Flourish Excel.
Flourish Excel.
Yeah.
And there's another one by API, which is an equivalent.
Is it Leaf
Leaf
Zone?
Booster or Leaf Zone.
One or the other.
Yeah, it's a liquid carbon form. I'm going to add to that and say that plants are like fish and that some are easier to maintain than others. So it all depends on what you want to keep. If you are turned on by a lot of the fancier, Rotala macranda or very delicate, bright red, pine leaves stuff.
Dwarf baby tier carpets, stuff like that.
Then and you don't want to invest the time into the tank, then it's not for you. But there are quite a number of plants, like we mentioned Anubias many times, Cryptocarans, Balasnarias, a lot of the sword plants.
Sword plants, absolutely. Yeah, vals are great.
These are not difficult, even amongst sort of the stem type plants.
Sunset hygro?
Hygrophilias, there's quite a few different types of them. Rotala indica is one of my favorites of the fine leaf plants. So there are some pretty decent options for plants that are relatively undemanding, not overly quick growing, so you don't have to be in there pruning them all the time, and you don't need CO2 to go with them. So if you do a little bit of homework and just sort of look at what plants you really want to keep, I would make the decision based upon that.
And it's also important if you're going to go without CO2 that you don't go overkill on lighting, because the higher the light is, the harder the plants are going to try to photosynthesize. But if they don't have the ability, because they don't have the CO2 for them to photosynthesize with that light, you're going to end up with algae problems. And either that, or even with Anubias, if you go high light, a lot of time you bleach the leaves out, they go yellow or very, very pale. So just don't do overkill on the light if you're going to go low tech. And if you're going to go with highlighting and you want to try all that stuff, just don't get discouraged and just get the right equipment to start with, and it'll be a lot easier for you.
Keith O'Reilly wants to know, he says, I have my tank cycling, my 55-gallon tank cycling for about 4 months, have some inverts in there and a few chromies. Nitrates are always around 20 parts per million. So how do I get those down? Will water changes do it?
20 parts per million is absolutely acceptable.
Yeah. If you're going to do certain corals, it's probably at your upper range.
Yeah, in my experience, I've actually had issues with a lack of nitrates in saltwater tanks, and a lack of nutrients will affect corals adversely as well as a abundance of nutrients. 20 is fairly normal. It is pretty difficult to get under 20 unless you really stop feeding the tank entirely.
There's a few things we don't know here. I mean, if the tank is only partially stocked and he's planning on putting more stuff in there, then the nitrates are going to get much higher than they are now.
Potentially. It depends.
We don't know if he's done any water changes either. So.
Yeah, and it's only been
4 months.
4 months. So that's pretty young for a saltwater tank. 4 months isn't a long period of time. The size of the tank, how much live rock you have, all these things, how you're filtering the tank, it all plays a role in it. But 20 parts per million isn't really like an alarm for me. That's pretty standard. Most people with a cycled saltwater tank are going to hover between 10 to 20. Getting 10 is achievable, but usually difficult. And below 10, I don't even advise. A lot of people say zero nitrates. You want zero nitrates. You don't want any nitrates. You need some. You just need some. First of all, if you have zero nitrates, you want to constantly test for ammonia because you have no idea what's getting converted when or where. Having that little bit of nitrates in there all the time is not a problem. And if you're going to do soft coral, you never want zero nitrates because they actually pull it in fairly constantly.
Yeah. And if you're not doing regular water changes now, then start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, water changes definitely dilute nitrates. I mean, there's minimal nitrate in the water that you use, particularly if using RO.
Which you should be.
Yes. Then there's zero, pretty much. So it's just a matter of mathematics and dilution. So
Keith follows up with ammonia, nitrites always zero pH, or always zero pH around 8.0. No water changes to date. 40 pounds of rock, canister filter.
You can easily get those nitrates down. by doing a few water changes. If you do 25% water changes, even if you do 5 gallons at the end of every week for 4 weeks, you will make a pretty massive dent.
I might go a little bit larger, especially as you get more stuff in there for sure. You know, the small water changes aren't gonna.
No, they won't do a ton, but it'll still do a decent job. I personally have, in the past, with tanks less than 100 gallons usually, I'll do 20 to 25% water changes weekly to actually also restore not nutrient content, but trace elements back to the water. So calcium, magnesium, strontium, molybdenum stuff. So you don't have to dose as often. So if you make a habit of doing a weekly water change of a decent size, not huge, just decent, you'll actually use less additives while maintaining a lower nitrate level.
Next question is kind of a two-parter. One from Judy, and then a follow-up, I guess, by always be one. So Judy asks, I have Epsom salts. How much do I put in the tank? I have a 45-gallon tank. So that's the first part. And then Lois D1 asks, which is better, Epsom salts or aquarium salt? So we'll start off with Judy. Her question, how much salt do I put in the 45-gallon tank?
Okay, so that was the Epsom salts for the Angel. Epsom salts, my rate of treating is 1 tablespoon per 10 gallons. Okay, and bear in mind that that will remain in your water until you do water changes out. Salt does not evaporate, filter out, or do anything. Now, part 2, Epsom salts and aquarium salt, 2 totally different chemicals.
Yep.
Magnesium sulfate, sodium chloride, unrelated in any way, shape, or form. So aquarium salt won't do the job on a laxative.
Right.
Does other great things for freshwater fish.
Yep.
But not the same things.
And okay, perfect.
So we're going to take another quick break, and we're actually probably going to take a slightly longer one, get a little bit of hydration in us so we can keep answering these questions. So we'll be back in about 3 to 5 minutes, so sit tight. Don't forget, this is a perfect time to email us.
Yeah.
Since you're going to be waiting for us to come back and have nothing to do. Send us an email at customerservice@bigowlsonline.com. Let us know you're looking for the exclusive deals from the live Q&A. Make sure you give us your name, your location, where you're from, and also whether or not you're going to be shopping online or in store so we can hook you up with the appropriate deal. And we'll see you in a bit. So we're going to answer some more of your questions, but before we do that, don't forget to contact us for your exclusive deals and share this with all of your friends on social media. Let them know if they tune in, they can get those exclusive deals as well.
Time is running out.
It is. We've only got about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour if we stretch it left to answer your questions. So those deals are going to last until then. Don't forget, contact us, customer service at bigowlsonline.com, and give us your name and your location, as well as whether or not you're going to be shopping in-store or online, and we'll hook you up.
Back to the questions, guys.
All right.
We have one from Lisa. She has a variety of Tetras, about 20 or so. She says they moved from a vertical 15-gallon tank to a 45-gallon tank about a week ago. She said the fish seemed fine for the first few days. Yesterday she found one green fire dead, and one rummy nose is having a difficult time schooling with the others. Its spine is a bit curved, and it mostly only turns in one direction. Lisa did some research, and it seems to resemble whirling disease, but she isn't certain. She says the fish ate this morning, and she doesn't see any other visible indications like spots or discoloration. She had the water tested this morning, and all the levels seemed fine. Any suggestions or ideas would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. I'm glad she's testing her water. There's a couple of things. My honest suspicion is that there's not going to be a lot more mortalities going on as long as the water, the tank doesn't cycle. I suspect that these fish may have been injured in the netting, damaged in handling somehow. That's fairly common, and it won't necessarily manifest itself right away. So definitely observe your fish for further symptoms. Most diseases will give you something, but to go upon dosing the tank on one fish and one sort of casualty when you moved as many fish into such a substantially low water, it's a little premature. My concern would be that you kept the old filter running on the new setup and that you didn't clean it to preserve your good bacteria until the new filter at least gets established, or preferably yet, just leave them both running. And also that you acclimated your fish. Even though your water may be good, you did basically a 2/3 water change, and that's pretty large. And there's a lot of chemical factors that you don't really get test kits for. So even though your water may test well, the fish were used to 15-gallon tanks of well-established, mature, bioactive water. I'm presuming that you moved the 15 gallons of old water into the 45. I really hope you did.
That's best practice always.
Yeah, but even then I would have made sure to do a very slow and careful acclimation, because that's still a big shift, a certain amount of stress. And Tetras like it kind of old and a little bit dirty. I mean, that's sort of an Amazon sort of environment that they're from originally.
Established, especially biologically established, is super important.
So at this point, I can't say to do any one specific thing. You know, keep testing your water, wait and see. Hopefully things settle down for you. If you do see more fish exhibiting the same kind of symptoms, then I might suggest going in with a treatment that has a formalin compound, something like a carnivorous, which is a malachite and formalin. But bear in mind that Tetras are very sensitive to full dose on these things, so usually you're going to go with half strength, and that might help you a little bit, but I doubt you're going to need it.
Right on. And also, just as best practice, whenever you're upgrading tanks, if you're in the position to, you have the space, I would say run both tanks together until the other one's already biologically established, add a few fish at a time, the same way you would if you were starting that tank brand new, rather than just picking up one tank and dumping it into the new one and filling up the rest of the water, essentially. Although a lot of the time that does work pretty well, but if there's enough of a difference, it's best that you run both tanks rather than immediately change it over.
Yeah, and over the course of that time, you could be doing water changes on the older aquarium and putting that old water into the new tank so that you actually wind up with 40–50% the water that they originally were used to.
Absolutely.
Next question from Michael Wong. He asks, what brand of salt do you recommend? Is it worth the extra cost if I'm doing a regular dosing of Ca, Mg, IO, and ALK?
My personal favorite is an in-store only item. It is Aqua Vitro Salinity. I've used a lot of salts over the years, and it has proven to me to be one of the best for various reasons. Mixes extremely well. It's very magnesium rich. Calcium and everything else is perfect in place where it needs to be, and I just really like it. Now, I've also used reef crystals, Red Sea Coral Pro or reef salt. I've used Tropic Marin. Of all of the other ones, I would say the Red Sea is probably my next favorite. If I'm not going to use Aqua Vitro, I'll usually use the Red Sea, although I've used reef crystals for years and years and years and had great success as well. I find it doesn't mix as well as some of the other salts, but it works really well. So,
okay. So our next question is from, let's find him here. I believe it's Keith. Keith asks, hi again, in that same 55-gallon tank I mentioned, is it safe to introduce a few easy-to-manage corals like candy tree or star polyp, etc.?
Yeah.
4 months, sure.
Absolutely. My recommendations for starter soft corals, star polyps work really well. They're a good tell too. They're not easy to kill, but they will react fairly quickly if parameters drift. If something's annoying them, they won't open. So they're a good indicator coral. Xenia can be touchy, but also works as a good indicator coral because they very quickly will show if something's not right. For general purpose, just corals, devil's hand leather corals, umbrella leather corals, pretty well any leather coral, with the exception of a very few yellow Fiji leathers, are kind of touchy sometimes. Work extremely well, and they're very forgiving.
Mushroom anemones?
Yeah, Discosoma are great.
Yeah. With the star polyps, I second you on that. Just make sure you give them lots of flow.
Yep. Flow is a big
They
thing.
need a ton of flow.
If they ever start to develop algae, or algae starts to settle on them, or debris, that will prevent them from opening, and until you clear it, they won't open. So high flow is really important. They can take a lot of flow, like much more than you'd expect.
Blown in the wind, and they like it that way.
Yep, absolutely.
Blown in the wind.
You've got lots of options. When it comes to colt corals and Kenya tree corals, I usually suggest you add those after you've already had some success with the leathers. The leathers are just way more forgiving.
Vi Garrett asks, I would love to get a Matamata turtle. What do I need? Thanks.
I would suggest, unless you have a lot of space, against it. They're incredibly interesting animals. Not good. I'd love to tell you how to do it, but it goes against what I believe is responsible turtle keeping. And
unfortunately, I can't speak to that. So
they're gorgeous, but they get
massive.
Yeah. I have the same stance with alligator snapping turtles. Yeah, they get way too big, way too big. So unless you're gonna have like a public display sized aquarium in your home, don't even bother. We're talking like really, in my opinion, 400 to 500 gallon aquarium is a minimum for an adult.
Thanks.
All right, another question from Michael Wan. Currently I have 6 angels in a 120-gallon planted tank, and I'd like to add some more color. Would I be able to mix angels with African cichlids?
No. I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm the cichlid guy here. Okay, so first of all, there's probably over 1,000 different types and color morphs of African cichlids. Nearly all of which don't do well in planted tanks, or should I say the plants don't do well with cichlids. The types that you're probably attracted to would be a lot of the Mbuna, the rock-dwelling types like Libidochroma, zebras, Kenya, that kind of stuff. Highly aggressive. I don't see your angels faring very well with them. The types that might do well would be some of the Gelidochromos from Tanganyika. Yeah. They're much like a dwarf cichlid, like a crebensis or a ram would be. You have a few rocks, a few caves, they'd be happy, they'd be neat and interesting. Shell dwellers, a lot of the smaller rock-dwelling Tanganyikan guys, the lamps and the Julies, would be fine, but they're probably not what you're looking for. They're interesting fish, but they're not necessarily super, super colorful. Yeah, my preference there would be some of the larger tetras, a nice school of Serpae tetras, something like that. I mean, cardinals, neons, if you have big angels, they'll just probably be viewed as snacks. And rainbow fish. You can't go wrong with some really beautiful adult-sized rainbow fish of many, many different species for color and action.
Absolutely. The rainbow fish is a great suggestion. If you're really just attracted to the, I guess, cichlid form, then I would stick with things like rams.
German rams.
Apistos, they're pretty small, but they're super colorful.
And their behavior is cool.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Our next question from Melinda is, any ideas why a small black spot has appeared on my otherwise bright orange parrot cichlid? He's full grown, 7 to 8 inches long, and in otherwise good health. It just appeared one day.
A lot of parrot cichlids that I've seen will get miscoloration just naturally as they grow. Lots of fish actually can get that, especially if they're hybridized fish.
Yeah, see it a lot. I wouldn't worry about it.
Not unless it's like protruding or has a fuzziness to it or a texture. If it's just coloration, I've seen them develop spots. I've seen them develop spots over their eyes, on their tail, on their body.
I've seen that with other cichlids and parrots.
Yep.
You know, a lot of the Africans I've kept have developed with that, that kind of stuff with age, and it doesn't seem to be anything that affects their health. Technically, you can get black spotting from myxobacteria, which are very difficult to get rid of. But I wouldn't go dosing your tank with antibiotics. If everything's working for you and you're testing your water with your water changes, good variety of foods, it's fine. Leave it.
As a follow-up, Michael Wan, who asked about adding African cichlids into his tank with angels, he says thanks, he'll try the rainbow fish.
Nice. You'll like them. You won't be disappointed.
One of my favorite groups of fish. Favorite.
Awesome. And watch them in the mornings when the lights have just come on. The males are actually a lot like cichlids. They'll flare up and do their displays and court the females. It's really something to watch.
And they, a lot of them will actually flash different colors on the tops of their heads, which is really neat. I actually almost always put dwarf rainbows in planet tanks just because I love watching them coral and flash each other is really cool.
Next question is from Ann Kit. He asks, if I cycle a filter on my old tank and put it in my new tank, will it change the water parameters? Will it kill beneficial bacteria in the filter or not? Thanks.
Shouldn't.
Nope. If I'm understanding this correctly, you're establishing a filter for a new system on your old system.
Yep.
Great practice. Absolutely fantastic. Just as long as the water in the new system, when you fill it up, is treated before you put the canister filter on, the bacteria should be absolutely fine, and that is a great thing to do. And you will be able to stock a little bit faster if you do that. A little bit faster. Don't go nuts. But yeah, you won't have the same kind of ammonia spike that you'd normally have with a freshwater startup or even a saltwater startup. So yeah.
And I believe we touched on this before with the 15-gallon to the 45-gallon move. If it's feasible to do it over the course of that time with your water changes from your older tank, try and put some of that older water into the newer setup.
Yep. Just
so that you've got 30-40% old water in there. Also goes a long way as well as a filter.
Big time.
Yeah.
Okay, a question from Greg. He says, I really want to set up a cool predator tank that will have lots of action during feeding time. He says his store is the Mississauga. He shops in Canada, Mississauga. He says he likes that feeding frenzy and there's a lot of action. He wants to know, can you recommend some fish so he can have something similar at home with a lot of action?
It really depends upon what size of tank you're willing to set up, because a lot of the predators get big.
Very big. If you like surface action, arowanas are great to feed.
Yeah.
You also have to worry about them jumping out, but
Gars
are great.
Yeah. If you want a smaller size gar, there's what they call the rocket gar or the silver gar from South America.
Yeah.
Only gets about 6-7 inches. That's quite manageable. There's another, the marble gar from South America is another moderately sized fish, which only usually gets about a foot. Needle-nose gar from Asia, also about a foot. So those, if you want that kind of action, they'll be all over whatever you put in.
Pike live bearers.
Yeah, don't see them much anymore though.
No, but they're
Not very
unless you go traveling. if you do manage to find them, they're fantastic and stay very small by comparison to some of the other ones.
Some of the smaller, anything that's, a lot of the guys that give you the best action are the shaped fish, the fish that look like a northern pike or a gar. You know, they're the guys that just
fly across
and just grab something. So pike cichlids, if your tank is big enough, and there are different species. That most of them get big, but there are some dwarf pikes that are occasionally available. What else might come to mind?
I can only think of like larger stuff. Peacock bass put on a pretty good show.
You think of large stuff, I'll think of small stuff.
Red-based snook can be kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a big fish, but that's a colorful fish.
Yeah, super colorful. Red-based snook are great for color, but yeah, they get big. Everything I know of gets big. Datinoids can be fun. They're usually not at the surface as much, but they'll take live food.
Now, if you're a customer of the Mississauga store, go see Praveen. He works there a lot, and he's really into those kinds of fish, and he can really help you out. Another one that comes to mind for, say, a moderately sized fish would be something like a Malaysian or an African knife. Oh, yes. There are the clown knives, which get super big and are compatible with their arowanas, but you're looking at 200-gallon, plus tanks for these kinds of fish. But the Malaysian, the African knives only get about 8 inches, and they're gulpers. They're kind of like a saltwater lionfish where the mouth just expands and they inhale their food in. Compressiceps, if we're back to the cichlid world, Haplochromis compressiceps. If you want to do a nice cichlid tank and you want a predator in there, that's a pretty cool fish.
They're pretty awesome.
Yeah, they just sit there and wait. And then
yeah, they're really fun to watch. They track stuff. It's pretty cool.
Okay, guys, we have one more question left. If any of our viewers do have any last-minute questions they want answered, make sure you ask now, and we'll get to them before we leave. But for now, one of our last questions is from Dan. He wants to know, how do I measure the salinity of the water in my saltwater aquarium?
Good question. There's a few different ways to do it. My favorite way to do it is to use a refractometer, sometimes called a refractometer. They're just the most accurate way of doing it. They can be a little bit, compared to some other things, you can expect to spend anywhere from $50 to about $120 for a refractometer. The key difference is, A, you can calibrate them, but B, they're very accurate and easy to read. A lot of people use hydrometers, hydrometer. Swing arms hydrometers, which is basically a little plastic doohickey with a little swing arm in it. You fill it with water, and depending on how buoyant that water is, how much salt content's in it, it'll point at a number. They're not terribly accurate, and they're very easy to do incorrectly. You think it'd be simple, you just fill it with water and it just shows you. But if there's any bubbles on the needle at all, it doesn't matter how small they are, any at all, it'll affect the reading. And you could test the water 6 times and get a different reading every time. Also, you have to hope that it was calibrated correctly the first time. Because if it wasn't, you're not going to know. A lot of them don't start at 0. They start somewhere in the middle. I would always say refractometer.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. So if the refractometer is out of your budget, there's a couple of things to consider with choosing a hydrometer.
Floating hydrometers.
Floating hydrometers are, well, they're old school. They work fairly well. Any hydrometer, floating or otherwise. If you do get the swing arm, there are ones that have a narrow range of salinity, and there are ones that go all the way to freshwater. Definitely buy the ones that go all the way to freshwater. Then you can zero them. In other words, you can see how accurate they are.
Mm-hmm.
So you would take, say, room temperature, freshwater, fill it up to the right mark. That's another thing to consider, that these things have a certain level that they have to be. And if it's above or below that, most of them have a spillover. But if it's not there, it's not going to be accurate. So fill it to the right level. Freshwater, you should get 0, 0, 0. If you and tap it a bit gently, always, to get any air bubbles off. If you don't get 0, 0, 0, at least you know how much to add or subtract to all future readings.
Yeah.
So you can basically, that's your own sort of calibration. So if you're on a budget and you have to go that route, otherwise fully agree, refractometer is far more accurate. And again, you do calibrate them in freshwater periodically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had two questions come in. Right,
snuck them in.
Yeah. We have Maureen wants to follow up on the cobalt.
Cool.
She says, I've been told I need a filter that is rated for 100 gallons, even though it's a 55-gallon tank. because of how dirty the turtles are. Does Cobalt have one somewhere?
Cobalt gives you the option to basically run more than one or daisy chain them, so you can run them together. Depending on how you set it up, this I'm going to preface it with this actually. Most canister filters are rated really inaccurately, very inaccurately. I've talked about this before. I don't remember if we talked about it during the last Q&A.
I think we did.
I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, they'll put a rating on it that's based on a minimal stock of fish in like a best case scenario. And I
Brand spanking to the factory, never been driven before.
Exactly.
This is how many gallons per hour we got after we tested 10 of these, and this was the best case scenario with not a speck of dirt in it. That's how many GPH we got.
Right, and you know that should, in an optimal world, be able to run this size aquarium. So long story short, they're usually rated fairly poorly, and you have to take that number that you're given and cut it in half, is what the general rule
Which is where the advice came from, and also that it's a turtle tank, and it's going to have a lot of dirt.
Cobalt Aquatics rates it at 55 gallons very appropriately. For the size of the canister, the amount of media that's in it, and the flow rating, most companies are going to take that canister and rate it 25 gallons higher or more, depending on the company. For 2 young turtles, it'll definitely be enough to start on its own for a 55-gallon tank. Remember, there isn't 55 gallons of water. And beyond that, if you need to, at some point, you can always add a second one.
And if you do that, bear in mind you're not going to put the same media into both filters equally. So you have to take into account that one is effectively going to be your pre-filter and the other one is going to be your finer filtration.
If you daisy chain them, absolutely. Yes. They both come with a pump, so you can always run them just separately and do maintenance opposite weeks, so you don't have a ton of maintenance on one week or however you want to do it. But yeah, the rating's good. In my opinion, 55 gallons is solid. I would say that would be a good size for your tank, especially just to start. It's more than enough.
All right, guys, we're going to quickly jump to social media. If you guys want to connect with us in the future, anytime, day or night, weekend, weekday, doesn't matter, contact us on social media. We're just going to throw up the links on screen here for you guys to see, and we'll be back to answer our final question.
Well, welcome back. We're going to answer that last question we just got in just a moment. Before that, I just want to remind you quickly, shoot us an email for those exclusive deals. You want to send us an email at customerservice@bigowlsonline.com. Give us your name, your location, so where you're from, and then also just a quick memo whether or not you're going to be shopping in store or online so we can send you the appropriate offer. And yeah, let's do this.
Okay, our last question is from Melinda. She asks, I have a significantly sized Bala shark, around 9 to 10 inches, in my 120 cichlid tank. He's doing great. Are there any other species that can strive with cichlids?
Best choice would be red-tailed black sharks or ruby sharks. They don't get quite as large usually as your Bala, and they're semi-aggressive and territorial, much like your cichlids. So they generally will fend for themselves fairly well. Now, if you have an established cichlid tank, you're going to need to find large specimens. They're highly aggressive with each other, so either you're going to get one of a kind or 3 or more. 2 is not a good number with those kinds of fish.
Another really interesting species that I personally love that go really well with cichlids are Cynodontis catfish. Petricola catfish are really cool, and Multipunctatus as well. They're my favorites. Yeah. I would say they're probably, if you want to get something that's going to be less aggressive than those red tails and stuff, they'll be in your lower section of the tank as well.
They'll fend for themselves. They'll hide a lot. You'll see them more at feeding time or after the tank lights go out. But they're definitely very attractive fish.
Super, very shark shaped, but really brightly spotted, white, silvers. Very cool fish.
Last point, and this would be towards adding almost any kind of new fish to a cichlid tank, whether it's a cichlid or something like the red-tailed sharks. You are probably best to rearrange your interior aquascaping at the time that you put the new fish in, and try to introduce more than one fish at the same time.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Your tank's got a pecking order, territories are set up, and you basically have to play 52 pickup with that to give the new fish a chance to work their way into it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that wraps it up for this Q&A. We had a great time. Thank you so much for asking all those awesome questions. It's a lot of fun for us. We like to share our knowledge of the hobby. This is a passion for us. This is what we like to do. And to be able to share it with you guys is just like fantastic. It's a dream come true, one might say. Okay, maybe I'll just say this.
We enjoy it.
We do.
We do.
And we have a ton of other videos on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll send out notifications to you when we're doing more Q&As so you don't miss them.
Yeah. And how-tos.
How-tos. We've got product reviews, how-tos. Like, for instance, the Cobalt Aquatics canister. We have a review and a how-to of that. We've got the Jurassic Park how-to setup that we kind of did. It's a behind the scenes of how we built that. All kinds of cool stuff.
There's more coming. You got suggestions? Email us.
Please. Please. We like to make videos just because they're fun and informative. But if there's something that you'd really like to see, let us know. We got that request for that turtle tank video, so we'll definitely look into that, see if we can't get one of those up for you soon. And thanks for coming out.
Thank you.